Hello and welcome into Eye.Talk.Tech, the show where we take a look at the intersection of eye care and technology. I'm your host, Dr. Griffin Christenson, and today we welcome to the show Cory Boone. Cory's an optical engineer and really a wonderful communicator. Cory has an excellent YouTube channel, Vision Vibes, where he breaks down ophthalmic concepts like how eyes and glasses work, including some pretty awesome laser demonstrations, I must say. I would highly recommend checking it out. Cory, welcome on, and how are you doing today?
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here, doing well.
Glad to hear it. Cory, could you give me a little bit of the background and kind of the inspiration for forming your YouTube channel and what has you
Yeah,
so jacked up to share the concepts that you bring to your audience?
definitely. So I'm an optical engineer, so how light is used in everything from medical devices to laser welding to helping robots see. So that's a lot of different subject matter. But then I found myself explaining a lot to different people what nearsightedness really meant, or kind of these topics that people encounter in their day-to-day lives a lot. So I made the YouTube channel to explain these kinds of ophthalmic concepts from the perspective of an optical engineer. So a bit of a different spin on it than what you see a lot of the times out there, which is why I have my little laser demos and other things like that.
Well, and I imagine you've learned a lot as you go and come up with new topics and so forth.
Yes.
And for today, I want to delve into a kind of a crazy concept, bionic eyes. First of all, what the heck is a bionic eye? How would you define that?
Yeah, so it is essentially what it sounds like. It's an artificial eye. And so this is used in cases where somebody has maybe an injury to their retina, a disease impacting their retina, or just the way that their brain interprets signals from their eyes. So these devices can bypass the broken parts of the visual system. So there's really two types of this. One of them could be a retinal implant, so that is actually electrodes implanted into your retina, and then an eye-mounted camera. A lot of the times it's a headset, so glasses with a camera attached to the end, a little transmitter that sends signals to the electrodes, which then actually stimulate parts of your retina so your brain can interpret some images. And then, kind of the maybe more complicated version of that is a cortical implant. So, actually, in your brain, in the visual cortex, having some electrodes there. So, the information, again, likely from a head mounted camera, is just beaming that information straight to your brain, where it then stimulates parts of your brain so you can actually interpret some of what's around you.
That sounds wild.
It's
Is
pretty
that something
wild.
that's actually being done, or are these being put in humans?
Yes, largely through clinical trials. So it's not like you can just walk down to a store and buy a bionic eye or even through a doctor's office. Right now, they're very much in the research stage of things. So there's a few different examples. We can talk about different devices, but lots of them are going through clinical trials right now. But they are actually helping real people see again. Somebody that had whether it's very severe macular degeneration, retinitis pigmentosa, or damage to their optic nerve, these devices are helping them actually interpret what's around them. But one thing that's important to note is it's not a perfect recreation. It's not like they're seeing the same crystal clear images that maybe we're seeing on our cameras right now. Instead, it tends to be more of a grayscale, low resolution image, but that still can help somebody who otherwise has lost their vision understand what's around them and navigate a lot better.
Yeah, it's all relative, right? If you're a person
Definitely.
with no sight, in any sort of sight would be a pretty amazing experience. You
Yes.
mentioned a couple of particular devices. What are some of the devices that are on your radar?
So one of them that was the most well known and really kind of made some waves, and all the tech journals were talking about it and everything, was a device called Argus 2 from Second Sight Medical Products. And so this was an FDA approved device, and it was a retinal implant, again, head mounted camera on things that look like glasses. But due to some restructuring of the company and financial difficulties, that product is not available anymore. But the same company, or at least I believe Second Sight was incorporated into Cortigent, another company. They have a new device called the Orion system. It's another retinal implant, artificial eye, bionic eye, going through clinical trials. And there's a few other going through clinical trials, like one called the Prima implant from the Science Corporation and Pixium Vision, and another one called the second generation bionic eye from a company called Bionic Vision Technologies. So all these are going through clinical trials, so actually being tested on people. And again, it's giving them grayscale vision so that while before they really couldn't see anything, they have some sense of what's around.
Are all those examples of what you call a retinal implant, where it actually implants electrodes on the retina?
I believe all those are. I may be mistaken. BVT, Bionic Vision Technologies, might be a cortical implant into the brain. There are some of those brain implants being going through trials as well.
That's super exciting. So,
Yeah.
if you think about something that's actually implanted in the eye, what happens to folks if for instance, better tech comes out, or if there's a malfunction or something like that? Can you speak to maybe what a patient experience might be like?
True. Yeah, definitely some potentially scary concepts, but similar to anybody getting a pacemaker, anybody getting these other kinds of biotech devices, where yeah, it's implanted and then to have to replace that. I'm not personally familiar with replacing one of these devices. I sure hope that it is possible, and that's something going through the trials is seeing, all right, what happens if we have to take this device out? While I'm not involved in any of these trials or anything myself, I sure hope that that is looking into those same concepts. And yeah, you mentioned errors. Something goes wrong in your car, maybe your dashboard starts lighting up. Imagine an error going on in something that is giving you vision. Like hallucinations or errors, and that is definitely something of great concern. So a lot of effort is going into the cybersecurity of these devices, into just testing them as much as possible to make sure they work in different conditions.
Yeah, there's another particular device you mentioned, sort of the interface with the brain, kind of bypass
Hmm.
the whole visual system there. Um, and Neuralink, I know with the blind sight is going to enter into
Yes.
human trials towards the end of the year. What do you know about blind sight and how that maybe differs from a few of the other offerings?
So that is a cortical implant. So that is one that is just, electrodes directly into the brain. And that got a special designation from the FDA. It was labeled as a breakthrough device, which is a designation given to certain technologies seen as potentially having a great impact on improving a medical condition or reducing human suffering in some way. So that can kind of fast track it. So that is a device that also should be going through human trials later this year, and that would be one of the cortical implants. And yeah, Neuralink itself is such a pretty mind-blowing, pun slightly intended, technology for just the communication and getting information to your brain. And this would be an accessory technology that would allow vision. So again, there would likely be some kind of camera around that is picking up messages. But then a challenge and a real trick is then converting those messages into what your brain can understand. We don't have very good biotranslators in that sense. So that's why these images tend to be more fuzzy and grayscale, not in color and with much lower resolution than what our eyes can pick up naturally.
Have you seen any examples, or could we point listeners in a direction to get an idea of what one of these looks like, what the vision that somebody using a device might look like?
Definitely. I'm also making a little bit more of a deep dive video on my YouTube channel, again, Vision Vibes, and that should be out now if you want to just get a little more information, learn more about the specific types of devices. And again, that can show some recreations where you actually see a screen replicating what the user would be seeing.
Absolutely. Well, we'll link to that. Now,
Awesome.
I take maybe a little umbrage with one of the words in bionic eye. Certainly, I think we meant the bionic threshold. But when you say eye, a pair of
Hmm.
glasses or a camera, I don't know if that meets the threshold. I would love to see kind of the combination of prosthetic devices that we see with the technology that houses a camera or something like that. Are you familiar with any works to maybe combine visually the cosmetic aspect of an eye with the bionic nature of these devices that we're talking about?
Yeah, most of the research I did into this was looking at devices that are more these external cameras. I know there is work going into that, whether it's contact lenses that can record images or other kinds of funky ideas like that. I didn't see too much about these eyes going through clinical trials of any of them that just look like an eyeball, something like more just what you picture when you think of as an artificial eye, which I hope the technology continues moving in that direction. But there are some challenges on trying to get it in that kind of form factor. One of which being our natural human eyes are nearly diffraction limited, meaning there's a physical limitation to how sharply light can be focused to a point, and that's dependent on the wavelength of light you're looking at. We're just considering visible wavelengths, as well as the f number of a lens, which is the ratio of its focal length to its aperture, how wide it's open. So if this camera was looking just like our eyes, you can't really change the aperture, make it any bigger without changing just how an eye looks. And then I guess you could do interesting things with the focal length, trying to manipulate those kinds of things. So our eyes, if you don't have astigmatism or myopia, are approaching this diffraction limit, which is kind of the physical limit of how much resolution you can get. Some animals' eyes, like an eagle's eyes, for example, are shaped differently than ours. A little stretched out with a bulbous area at the back for a bigger retina space. So some of these things could improve resolution, but again, you're working with the built in architecture of our faces, of our skulls. So that limits it. But one of the major challenges I alluded to a little before is not even just how high resolution one of these eyes could get, it's also converting that information to what your brain can understand. Where right now, the neurons being stimulated by these different implants are about 1 to 10,000 times fewer neurons than what your eyes naturally stimulate to transmit visual signals. So things like Neuralink are working on improving that. So there currently isn't the technology to transmit these high resolution images to your brain, but maybe that will continue to improve.
So it seems like there's quite a few limitations or areas where we're meeting the bandwidth with these products. Hypothetically, though, if we're just going to look
Mhm.
at, what would be the far off into the future, what would be the theoretical maximum performance we could get out of a bionic eye? Would it be something that could far surpass what human vision is like today?
It potentially could if you have very high bandwidth methods of transferring the signals picked up from the camera to the eye, and then potentially doing some creative things where instead of just replicating the human eye in terms of the amount of area covered by the retina and recreating human lenses, something more akin to an eagle's eye, where you're actually changing the shape a little bit in a way that still works inside of our heads. Maybe just a bigger retina space and lenses that cover a bigger area on the back of your eye. So again, your retina could wrap around more of the back of your eye potentially. So in terms of in the future, that would be great. I do really hope that these things become compact and look more like just an artificial eye themselves. But yeah, once so right now we can pick up visible wavelengths. You could imagine you could have these sensors pick up infrared or ultraviolet wavelengths as well. So now you're stepping into the territory of enhancing beyond just what a natural eye can do.
Yeah, would you be first in line if we start enhancing eyes? Are you signing up for one?
First in line sounds a little risky. I'm very interested in that and would definitely be I'd be curious to see the ultraviolet other parts of the spectrum as well as polarization. Some animals can see the polarization of light and that lets them pick up patterns in the sky to help them better navigate, things like that. I'm very directionally challenged, so that would help me to have even better, navigation to just understanding what's around me.
I had ambitions of being, the first Superman when I was a child. I,
Yeah.
I I opted for optometry rather than acting eventually. I was nervous that they might not let me, play Superman being blonde and so forth, and that would be a
They have
blockage to my
wigs, it's
path.
fine.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We chose a different route. But to that end, how about X-ray technology? Is that could we see through
Mm.
walls? What would the physics tell us there?
So X-ray technology or even infrared technology can see through some materials, so you could approach those types of powers. The challenge becomes then having one device that covers all of these wavelength ranges. That's a challenge for any camera or sensor to try and be very hyperspectral or multispectral, meaning covering visible and infrared and ultraviolet. That just adds in challenges to the lenses you use, the coatings on those, the sensors picking that up. So theoretically, it is possible. Again, we're saying maybe far in the future, maybe there's a way to switch between different kinds of sensors in these types of devices, in which case you could swap between Superman X-ray vision and then normal conventional vision. Be
Quite a
amazing.
deal. That's
Yeah,
fascinating. Well, Corey, I enjoy talking about it. If anyone would like to learn more about these topics or similar ones, like we mentioned, you can go check out Vision Vibes. Maybe we'll have to check in after we see, blind sight and other devices as they're applied to use for human cases. Be
definitely.
interesting to check back in on this in the future, but I sure enjoy the conversation. Anything else you want to say about where folks can find you, Corey?
Yeah, so if you're interested in these eye-related topics, Vision Vibes on YouTube is a great place. Also, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so if you just look up Cory Boone, that will cover things including the ideas we just talked about, but also just other optical engineering topics. So again, how lasers are used, other camera ideas, and those kinds of subjects.
Well, I appreciate the heck out of it, Corey. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see
Thank
you
you.
next time on Eye.Talk.Tech.
Sounds great. Hope you have a good one too.